President Trump's ongoing threat to impose tariffs on Mexican goods, Joe Biden's policy reversal, and remembering D-Day 75 years later. It's been a busy week in politics, and we have Shields and Wehner here to analyze it all. That is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, Peter Wehner. And hello to both of you
Judy.
On this Friday. Let's start by talking about, Mark, what we led with tonight, which is we started talking about the jobs report today, but connecting it to this threat of tariffs on Mexico that the president has been talking about for days. Now, the latest word we're hearing is that maybe it won't happen, but it's thrown a lot of people off balance. Congress, Mexico, a lot of companies. How do you assess the president's handling of this?
Judy, it's the president. It's the way the president does it. It's very personal. It's high risk. It's not traditional. We're talking our two biggest trading partners, Mexico and China. And right now, I think what we're facing is probably best put by Angus King, the senator from Maine, who pointed out that 84% of the lobster business in Maine has already been lost because of the policy to Canada, and the likelihood of that getting back. And for the first time, I've seen a little bit of resistance, a little bit of vertebrae on the part of farm state Republicans. And I think that, but I predict right now, with absolutely no knowledge, that the president will declare victory, and there'll be something. But I can't believe it's going to do anything but leave relations with Mexico, which had been improving over the past 30 years, in just terrible and worse shape.
How do you size up what the president's been saying and how he's handled this?
I think Mark is right. There's a lot of volatility in this. Trump has a tropism for tariffs, if I can use that alliteration. It's one of the few issues that he's had deep convictions on for his entire life. It's hard to tell if he thinks it's a means or an end. If it's an end, we're in real trouble because tariffs are taxes. It hurt the economy. And it would create a lot of uncertainty in the market. And the other thing, the last thing that Mark said, which I think is extremely important, in some ways the most important part of this story, which is the damage that it's doing to the relations with Mexico. That has been a tremendous achievement, bipartisan achievement over the last several decades.
Mexico's an ally.
It is an ally, but the relations are getting distant and icy. And in fact, if you study what's going on in Mexico, you see this stoking that Trump is stoking anti-American resentment. And if that relationship goes south, so to speak, that is going to have a lot of ramifications that are harmful, economic, security, and otherwise.
Mark, you're saying, when you say you think the president may back off and accept whatever the Mexico offers, how much of that has to do with the politics of this, that he is running into headwinds from members of his own party?
No, I think there are, and I think that in the farm state, and there's states that he has to carry, quite frankly, in November 2020. But I think he has shown that ability, or the agility, I should say, to declare victory.
Do you agree with Mark that what we may see is the president's had everybody on the edge of their seats, but now
I suspect that's right, but it's such a question mark. I mean, one of the, I guess, motifs of the Trump presidency is he will be reckless or wants to be reckless, and his aides try and stop him. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But I do agree with Mark that whatever happens, Trump will declare victory. It doesn't have to be rooted in reality. It's just rooted somewhere in his own weird mind.
Well, we will. All right, we're going to move from the Republicans on this over to the Democrats, Mark. And Joe Biden made some news this week, in fact, last night, by reversing his position on an important, I guess, tenet of abortion law. It's the Hyde Amendment. It's the law that says federal funds cannot be spent on anything related to abortion. Here is what former Vice President Biden had to say last night.
For many years as U.S. Senator, I've supported the Hyde Amendment like many others have, because there was sufficient monies and circumstances where women were able to exercise that right, women of color, poor women, women who are not able to have access, and it was not under attack as it was then, as it is now. But circumstances have changed. If I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code.
So, Mark, the issues don't get any more sensitive than this one. Was this a wise move on Joe Biden's part?
No, I don't think it was. I mean, the way it was handled, Judy, he had been asked about it earlier and said he was for repeal of it, the Hyde Amendment, and then his campaign corrected it. His position said, no, he stood by the Hyde Amendment. And then last night, after pressure and considerable pressure from the pro-abortion rights groups, he changed. Is it politically? This goes right to the argument for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is sure-footed. He's experienced. He's not going to make mistakes. He can deal one-on-one with Donald Trump on the international stage. And he had an earlier event this week where his campaign rolled out its green plan, and it wasn't footnoted, it wasn't attributed, and this brought up unpleasant memories of 1987 and Neil Kinnock's
Some passages
paraphrase
in there
of
that-
plagiarism. That's right,
Yeah.
in the plan. I mean, so
There were passages in there that were identical. sentences.
which were not
That came
footnoted
from
as
other
such
places,
or anything
right.
of the sort. But so it's not been a good week for Joe Biden, I can honestly say.
Pete Weiner, how much, size up, I mean, it was as smart of Joe Biden to do politically, I mean, but let's talk about the substance of it, too.
Yeah, in terms of politically, I mean, he had to get off this position, but what's so hard to understand is why he didn't see this. The circumstances hadn't changed from the beginning to the end of the week. This is a central dogma, abortion rights, for the Democratic Party. I know that, and I'm not a Democrat. He obviously should have known that. So I don't know what was going through his mind or his campaign's mind where they would stay at a position that they had to have known they would jettison soon. If you're going to jettison a position, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. So it didn't look good, and it was a self-inflicted wound, and you don't want that, especially as Mark was saying, because one of the sales pitches for the Biden people is that this is a guy who's a pro. He's a consummate pro. I'd say one other thing, which is it also underscores the problem of having a 40-year record, because he had been supporting the Hyde Amendment for so long. And that's what I think probably explains it. He had this instinct to defend what he had for all these decades, and now he has to change. In terms of the substance of it, I mean, I'm troubled because I'm a person of pro-life convictions. In a very contentious issue, this is one of the rare areas where there was actually a compromise, which is to say we're not going to have federal funding for abortion. We're not going to end abortion, but let's not have federal funding for it. And now that's gone in the Democratic Party.
We have it, I was going to say, Mark.
Just in defense of Joe Biden, he's not alone. I mean, every Democrat other than Bernie Sanders in this race has voted for the Hyde Amendment. Because it has been the key on every major appropriations bill. That has been the rider in order to get bipartisan, namely Republican, votes for it. And Barack Obama, in an executive order, in order to pass the Affordable Care Act, reaffirmed the Hyde Amendment. So, but more than anything else, Judy, I think it showed politically that with the changing landscape, given the Republican state efforts and successes in repealing abortion options in states, it has changed the dynamic of this issue. And I think that this is where Biden didn't show sure-footedness.
It's made it even more sensitive,
Yeah.
than it was. All right, I want to ask you both about, this is clearly a week we've spent in somber reflection on D-Day. It was 75 years ago. There were the very moving ceremonies, Mark and Pete, on the coast of Normandy, President Trump, the president of France. Reflect on it for us for a moment, what we saw and heard, and also what its relevance is for today.
Yeah, I must say, in terms of watching it, it reminded me of why it was the greatest generation. It's been called the greatest generation. The more you find out about what happened 75 years ago, Normandy Beach, the more extraordinary it is. The courage and the valor and the selflessness. It is something that is awe-inspiring. So that was a kind of high note in a nation that needs that. In terms of what we've learned from it, the Atlantic Alliance isn't now what it was then. It's splitting apart, and it looks like the president, at least every other day, is happy with that. So things have changed. But for me, what was well, frankly sickening was this interview that Donald Trump did with Laura Ingraham on Fox News. And not just what he said, but where he said it. He had thousands and thousands of gravestones behind him, these people who had been cut down in the prime of their life. And he was attacking Nancy Pelosi and Robert Mueller, who himself was a war hero, in petty terms. And to have done it then was, in my mind, a desecration at a sacred place. And it was another window into the bonfire of anger and resentments and grievances that is Donald Trump.
I think Pete said it well. I just add this, Judy, that 9,388 Americans, husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, sweethearts, buried there, who either died at Normandy or in the liberation of France. And it was a time in this country, it was a we generation, not a me generation. I mean, we had 20 million victory gardens that civilians built that provided 40% of the vegetables for the whole country. We rationed everything from gasoline to liquor to cigarettes to butter to meat, and we did it. And all Americans that were part of the collective effort, the collective sacrifice, and it was led by those at the top, those of the greatest influence. The President of the United States had 4 sons. Every one of them served in combat. Every one of them was awarded in combat. Right. You take the millionaire, multimillionaire son, sickly son of a multimillionaire who asks his father to use his contacts to get him into combat, John Kennedy, rather than stay out. And you go forward to where we are now, where those 1 of the 4 American males served in World War II, and now we have 1/3, 1% of Americans serving, and they are serving over and over over again. 18 years in Afghanistan, and if we had a draft, that would not be the case, Judy.
And we've had several presidents who have.
We've had several presidents
and avoided service.
18 years longer than World War I, World War II, Korea, and the Civil War combined. And we're still there. And what are we doing to pay for it and sacrifice? We've had 3 tax cuts.
It's been 75 years, Pete Wehner. What remains in the American psyche from that?
Well, we're an angrier country, a more divided country, and a more tribalistic country than we were then. It's important to say that in many ways we're a better country too. If you're a minority or a woman, all sorts of things where we've made progress. But there was a kind of honor at that time. The thing is that the American capacity for self-renewal can be great, and sometimes when virtues are taken from the life of a nation and an individual, you remember why they matter to begin with. And hopefully commemorations like this can remind us that there are things that worth fighting for and worth living for.
Well, it's certainly worth going back and looking again at the ceremonies and reflecting on what it represented in the sacrifice. Peter Wehner, Mark Shields, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Judy.